Welcome back, it's been a while. I'm back with a highly anticipated video, highly anticipated only by me. I'm pretty sure all my friends have listened to me talking about this exact same topic like 1 million times already. They're pretty annoyed and I'm sure they don't want to hear it anymore. So that's why I'm here, sharing my thoughts on Lord of the Rings and the books, just the books, not the movies, and why I think they're pretty overrated. Just a really short spoiler alert, obviously since I'll be talking about the books, I'll talk about things that happen in the story, so if you don't want to be spoiled, then, I don't know, just click away or read the books and come back. I might also be talking about Eragon or the Inheritance tetralogy just a bit, because that is quite a good reference point for me personally. So if you haven't read those and you don't want to be spoiled, then maybe also don't continue watching. And also another disclaimer, if you are a huge Lord of the Rings fan, you absolutely love it, you think it's the best book that has ever been written, and you take personal offense when people criticize it or point out negatives, then maybe you don't want to continue watching because, like, I don't want to ruin your day, you don't want to be in a bad mood, so go ahead and watch something else. And of course, this is just my opinion, it's not like I'm trying to hate on anyone. I'm genuinely curious why people like the books, or like which parts, what aspects of the books they liked. I asked some of my friends and I'll get back to that in a second, but I'm genuinely curious why people like that book, because to me it's something I really did not enjoy. I forced myself through the Hobbit book, which was okay. The first book of Lord of the Rings, which was already worse, and then the first half of the second Lord of the Rings book, which after that I just stopped. I'm not gonna continue reading the books. I thought for a while that I would eventually return, but then I just noticed that like there's really no point in trying to get through the books when I really do not enjoy them, so I will not get back to them. That means I have not even read the last book. I don't know what's going to happen. But yeah, tell me why you liked the books, or why you didn't like the books. So to get back real quick to what my friends said, because I talked to them about this for quite a while, I always complained about how I really didn't like the books, and they're like, yeah, well, you know, it gets better after a while. It did not get better. I don't think it got better. But so when I asked them, one of them replied that there was a nostalgia factor. So they had already read it when they were younger, and now going back, or now looking back, they had like really nice memories of just the time in general, just the story, and how like they were excited about everything. Which for me, I don't get that, obviously. I never read the books before, so I don't really get those memories from like my childhood and whatever. I do see though how that could be a pretty big factor, because I was reading Eragon just before I started reading Lord of the Rings, and I already read Eragon when I was like in my late childhood, early teens, so I definitely get that. Like the nostalgia factor is pretty big, I would say. So I do understand when people say like, yeah, it's just good memories. And then my other friend said that he really liked the story and the world building, which that is already something I'm not quite sure I agree. So he said he liked that that the world is like really wide, and that there's a lot of information given on like the history, the places, the people. I agree to an extent that that can be quite good. And I say can be because I think they did a really good job at like building this huge world with like a lot of cities, a very rich history, a lot of connections between like the tribes, the different races. There's like wars and whatever. I don't even remember. But I think there was a huge potential for the story to be really exciting. But they, in my opinion, what happened is they had all this information. They built this huge world with like all these different, like this really rich culture. And then what happened is they didn't make use of that. And that is quite a waste in my opinion. Like I feel like there was a lot of potential that was just wasted big time. And I had a look at the Middle Earth map, basically the map of like the places with all the place names and rivers and whatever. And then I had a look at the routes that I don't even know what they're called, that the group took. it was shocking to me because you look at the map, it's like a pretty huge map. It's pretty detailed, there's a lot of mountains, and like you just have like a really nice landscape. But then the route they take is like such a small part of the whole world. And I think that is a huge waste, because going back to Eragon, because I read that right before, right? You look at the Eragon map, it's not that big. You have like a few pretty big cities that are important and a mountain range, but then what they do is they travel around that map a lot and they explore a lot. Like they go to different places, and you get like really interesting stories within that map. You really get to explore the areas. And I feel like that was really lacking, at least in the parts that I read, so the first 1.5 books. They did not do a good job at like giving you time to explore the world. It felt really rushed, I think. They were just, it was a lot of traveling from place to place to place to place, a lot of walking. A huge focus on the whole book was on walking. And don't get me wrong, I love a good landscape description. I really like descriptions, but then there was so little interactions. It was in a way as if that group, the Hobbit and the other people, and the landscape were like two different stories, just running in parallels. And that I think was a little sad, because they had this huge world built up with like all the people, all the families, all the clans and everything. And then they never referred back to them. So basically you got pages on like families and family history and wars and everything. And then they never referred back to them. Like it was literally irrelevant to the story. I do see though how me having read Eragon before might have influenced my opinion on, or like my view on basically Lord of the Rings. Because in Eragon, right from the beginning, you get introduced into this world where there's obvious evil, and then the main character is the good guy, and they're just trying to get rid of this dictator that is ruling over the country and not doing nice things. And so there's this very clear goal that everything is like working towards. Whereas in Lord of the Rings, it feels very much like the journey is already supposed to be like the story. And so you get like a lot of description and a lot of like, it's more like in the moment. It's not like the end is the goal. Like obviously, yeah, they have the ring and they try to get rid of that or destroy it, or I don't even know. But so that does not seem to be the main focus of the books at all. Like the journey seems to be the main focus and how they get there, not the end goal in itself. Whereas in Eragon, it feels like the journey is still pretty good. Like the journey is still pretty good, but it's working towards something. And that aspect is way more focused on in Eragon and not so much in Lord of the Rings. That's what it felt like to me. In that case though, if the journey is supposed to be the end goal or like the main aspect of the books, then there are some things that just really bugged me about that part as well. Because as I said, there's not much interaction between like the landscapes and the history and like the family connections and the races and the characters. And the characters, in my opinion, they were lacking, to say the least. It feels like because it's such a big group, you get like, I don't know how many it was, like 6, 8, 12, I don't even remember. But it was a lot of people to keep track of. And then obviously with so many characters, it's hard to keep track of all of them, to give them like a really deep and rich personality and to see like the character development. It's hard to do that. It's harder to do that for 6 characters than for just 2. But it does feel like the characters are all kind of shallow. Like you don't get to know them on a very deep level. The main character, the Hobbit, you get to know quite a lot about him. Gandalf obviously is a pretty important... Oh, I will get back to Gandalf in a second. But Gandalf obviously being like a pretty important person, it seems like. But the others are like, you get to know like a little bit here and there. But you don't really get to know them on like a really deep level. Which, going back to Eragon, compared to Eragon, you get to know Eragon like he's a pretty stubborn kid in the beginning. He's like very naive. And then you get to see how he has to, under a lot of pressure, a lot of pain, and like also some happy things, you see this development that is really interesting to follow. But in The Hobbit, I was really missing that aspect. It's just, I did not really care about the characters, to be honest. Like, yeah, they had their cool moments here and there, but I mean, given the amount of people it was, I guess it is understandable that it's not that easy to get to know them, quote unquote, personally. The only really interesting character, I think, in my opinion, is Gollum. And why is that? Well, we get in the Hobbit book, we get to know why Gollum, I think it was the Hobbit book, or maybe it was the first book of Lord of the Rings, I don't remember. But we get to know why Gollum turned the way he is. You get a pretty nice insight into like his past in connection with like the ring and the obsession thing. And you get a pretty good insight into him as a character, what he wants, that he's like so really obsessed, but that he like there's some kind of remorse, and it just feels very well thought out, which I think is pretty good. That is, Gollum is not a nice character. He creeped me out quite a lot, but it was a really interesting character to follow, and I was looking forward to the places where Gollum would return in the books. And the last thing I was gonna mention, this is about the death of the quote-unquote death on Gandalf when they went through that underground thing. I don't, like in the first book, somewhere towards the end of the first book, they went through this underground, and then there's this monster and they run away, and then Gandalf is like dragged into the depth of hell. I don't even know. But so I thought that was pretty poorly written, because like Gandalf was such an important part of the story, right? Like up until that point he had been really important. He's like their guide, he's making all the decisions, he's like fighting, and then all of a sudden it's like, yep, he died because of some stupid mistake. That did not come across as believable in any way, and it was pretty obvious that he, in my opinion, pretty obvious that he did not actually die. So that was, I don't know, there's just a few things like that where it's like, I don't know, that it's just pretty shallow. Oh yeah, and then last but not least, this is also going back to the whole story, like the story as a whole. It felt like very straightforward. There was not a lot of interaction between the different parts of the story. So like there was this one part where something happened, and then something else happened, and there was no connection between any of the parts. Like the only connections were like the Black Riders or whatever, and then there's some like tiny bit connection here and there. But I just really missed the connection between the story as a whole, which I think in Eragon, again going back to Eragon, you get that a lot. You know, they will say something in the beginning, and it is quite mysterious in the beginning, you don't understand what it's about, but then you move forward in the story, and then they will refer to that again, and then they will explain it, and you get like more information bit by bit by bit, and it's really interesting because you get to discover the world, but they don't throw everything at you, and there's still like just this like connection back to what happened before. Whereas in Lord of the Rings, it's just one thing happens, okay, and next thing happens, okay, and next thing happens, and which I don't like. I don't like that type of story. It's just too simple. And this is all I have really. So basically, yeah, the descriptiveness and the overflow of information that is not being made use of properly, in my opinion. The characters were pretty poorly designed, executed, I don't know, and the story was too straightforward. I wish there was a little more interconnectivity between the different parts and between the different books as well. But yeah, I know I probably sound like I absolutely hated the books, and it's not like I hated them. It's just that I did not enjoy them as much as I thought I would, because they are pretty overhyped. A lot of people talk about them as really good books, really good movies. I speeded through the Eragon books because they were really exciting to me, but then the Lord of the Rings books, it just dragged on, and I just did not enjoy them. They're not bad books per se, just there are some things that I really didn't agree with, but I do see how some people could potentially like them. But yeah, let me know, did you like them? Did you not like them? Do you agree with what I said? Do you think this was complete rubbish? I'm curious to know. and I'll be back someday.